How confident are you, or can you be, in what's happened with that plane? Was Prigozhin on it? Is he now dead?
Well, of course, we would not know for sure for quite some time, but essentially we have Prigozhin's own allies and a number of Russian kind of patriotic pro-war Telegram channels and a number of speakers confirming his death. So this is what we're pretty much assuming is true. Plus, given the circumstances that it was most likely shut down, very much seems that he was on board.
And are you surprised that no one is surprised that Prigozhin is dead, because he came at Putin and he wasn't successful in the coup? But the manner of his death, this wasn't someone suspiciously falling out of a window. This wasn't a mysterious poisoning that is easily denied. This was a missile coming out of the sky to take out a plane over Moscow. Are you surprised that that was the method used? And what does that mean, do you think?
Well, after his mutiny 2 months ago, I would have assumed he would be lost somewhere in Africa. I mean, he was advised to leave Russia, never to return. Some of his forces went to Belarus, some went to Africa, and I assumed he would be somewhere there. But I mean, myself included, and many of my colleagues did believe that he would not survive to see the court, to see the trials, to see post-Putin Russia. But what we've seen yesterday is pretty much a very mafia-like kind of revenge of Vladimir Putin. And I think the goal here, of course, is for all of us to see that, look, he tried to rebel, he betrayed the interests of the Kremlin, and this is how we are now resolving those issues. This is a warning to everyone within the military, within the PMCs, and all the other elite groups that might be considering to rebel against Vladimir Putin, to split the elites, to somehow take charge. The Russian state no longer pretends not to use violence in this kind of most gruesome and direct matter. And you've said it correctly, it did happen very much close to Moscow. I mean, it's war. I mean, Russia's been in war for over 500 days, so we will probably see more of those very direct, very kind of war-like methods of eliminating Putin's opponents within the country as well.
And how will this be presented in Russia, the state media? Will they say, how much will it be said this was Putin taking revenge on the failed coup? How much will that just be implied? How does this get presented by the state to Russian citizens?
Well, so far we're seeing just a little bit, tiny bit of coverage, basically, that a plane that most likely carried Prigozhin on board went down. That's about it. But if you look at Russian Telegram channels where people actually communicate information, we're seeing either hints, or half of people are kind of hinting that, you know, we know what happened here. The other half is like, well, this is clearly a revenge of Vladimir Putin. So, I mean, there's going to be a little doubt among those who actually follow news that he was taken out because of his failed mutiny.
And presumably Russians are very good in history at reading between the lines. When the state says one thing, that they know how to read these things, but from bitter experience, you might imagine.
Well, I mean, you have to be really trying, really kind of pushing the line yet again to believe that this was just a coincidence, or that was Ukrainians or Biden or whoever. I mean, 2 months ago, he took his forces out of Ukraine, they marched to Rostov, then they marched to Moscow and stopped 200 kilometers before reaching Moscow. So, I mean, it's very hard to make yourself even try to believe that this is just a coincidence.
And just finally, do you think there's any possibility? You know, some Ukrainians report saying Wagner troops are heading towards Russia. You know, they did get to you know, they did start a march on Moscow previously. Is that possible? Is that something that people will be watching for? What the Wagner troops now do?
Well, first of all, we need to know that people in the Kremlin, they were smart, so they, after the mutiny, they basically made him take his forces out of the country, out of the war zone, some to Belarus, to Africa, and some signed contracts with Ministry of Defense, so they're now part of Russian military officially. So we don't actually know the exact numbers of people that are kind of close to the Russian border, and obviously they're going to be waiting for them. I mean, the latest news I've seen before going to bed last night was the people in Rostov, the military, the FSB, the police, on kind of on high alert. So they would be watching and waiting. But I don't think this is the type of organizations that functions with the people in charge, and the people in charge pretty much determine what the organization is. So I think Wagner, as a paramilitary structure, is gone. So we would hardly see an organized march in, even if there would be some skirmishes, which is a possibility now, of course. I don't think we're looking at another kind of attempt to march towards Moscow. That's not feasible.